Welcome back to my channel. This is Darian with Darian the Dev, and thank you guys for tuning in to week number 10 of the Career Progression live stream. So if you guys are into tech, entrepreneurship, coding, or startups, or anything like that, make sure you guys like, share, subscribe. It really helps me stay motivated to keep making this content for you guys. And that's basically all we talk about here on this channel. And excuse me, guys. This live stream is basically a weekly stream where myself and some professional software developers who work remotely on this curriculum, we just share what we work on each week and what we studied that particular week related to computer science, coding, all that good stuff to help us basically get better, whether it's like side project stuff we're working on or just general knowledge. So we put everything together here and we format it for you guys and we share it on this live stream. So I hope you guys enjoy. So today we got some React hook stuff. And I got a few examples going over using some React hooks in different ways, and then also the useEffect hook. And then Lala's going to come in and also talk about what she learned from hooks this week as well. So yeah, guys, I'm going to go ahead and call in our guests, and we will go ahead and get started. Yo. Alright, week number 10. You ready? Alright. Come over here. Share my screen. Alright, cool. So boom. Alright, so my slides should be popping up in just a second on YouTube. Okay. Let me know if you can see him. Whoa.
I see you.
Whoa.
There you go.
Got it?
Got it.
Alright, cool. So like I said, we're gonna talk about what I learned this week with React hooks and specifically the useEffect hook as well. I'm not gonna go crazy in depth. It's not gonna be anything game breaking or game changing. So if you guys are already pretty good at React, this might just be like overview or refresher information. But for me, I would consider myself newer to React, and I'm trying to definitely get more comfortable with state management. I was trying stuff like using Redux, and then that ended up being worse than just using state itself, in my opinion. So hooks became another option. So spent the most of this week kind of dabbling with this, and this is going to be like a overview of that, recapping like what I learned this week. So it won't be anything too, like I said, crazy, nothing that you won't probably find through just some general search information, but I think it'll be good to see everything kind of laid out with some examples. So hopefully that helps you guys. So hooks allow you to use state and other React features without writing a class. And I know that might not make a ton of sense, so we'll take it slow in the next couple of slides. So to understand really the advantages of using hooks, we need to understand like original state in React versus state with hooks. So let me move this up here. All right, so this code example right here is an example, if you guys aren't already familiar, of a React component or React application that's using traditional state with a class component. So you can see they declare state up here at the top, and they have a button text variable that just says click me please, like originally, and then when they click it, it updates the state of the button text to say thanks being clicked, and then obviously they just render some some HTML back. But at the end of the day, this is using state in the original way before hooks were introduced. So hooks are still pretty new, and this is still valid code as well too. So when I refer to like using state versus using state with hooks, it's not like one is out of date, and the other one is like, obviously hooks is newer, but you can still use state as well. So it's not like anything is wrong if you're still doing things this way. But so this is originally how we would have to manage state, an example of how we'd have to manage state and what that looks like without hooks. So we use a class component. You can see that we declare whatever the state variables are. We have to declare them in state, and then we update whatever those values are in our state by using set state. So that's the only way we can actually update pretty much any of our data. So again, super high level stuff, probably nothing groundbreaking if you've already been playing around and dabbling with React and doing some stuff yourself. Probably nothing really game changing right there. But it gets cool when we see it with hooks. So same concept. This is a different project though. So first of all, you'll notice that we're using a functional component now. So whereas before we were using a class component here, when we use hooks, we have to use them with just functional components. So that's one thing. Less code, looks a little bit cleaner. The next thing you'll notice is that we don't necessarily have like a constructor with a state object and all that stuff like you'll see back here. So there's a state object that has button text in it, and so this is shorthand. They don't actually show the constructor here, but there could also be a constructor written here as well where state's declared. So it ends up being a little bit cleaner where you don't have to do any of that stuff. You don't have to necessarily, you are declaring state, but you're doing it through hooks. So it just makes it a little bit, when you get used to looking at the syntax of hooks, it actually makes it, in my opinion, a little bit more readable. So what we're actually doing is we're declaring our state up here. So the state that I have for this component is going to be email and password. And then, and this is a hook example. So this is us, each of these right here, each constant is an individual hook. So we're using a hook for email and for password. And a hook takes two arguments. You can see right here why we have inside these brackets two different arguments. So the first one is like the state variable. This could be named whatever we want to call it. And then the second value or argument is going to be the setter function that we use to update this value. So we could name either of these whatever we want. It should obviously be intuitive or something like that, like that you can remember. But we're going to always call these functions to update these values, as opposed to back here, they use set state to update button text. In our example, we're going to use set email and set password to update email and password. So anyhow, you'll see down here, we call it set email and we set it to the value of like what we're typing in. And then same thing for password. And again, just using state right here, this is just this whoa, one sec guys. Okay, so this is just the syntax right here for like how we actually declare. This is how we actually declare a hook, and then inside of here we can give it whatever like default value that it should have. So email should have a default value of hello in this case, and then password should have a default value of your password. So we could leave these as empty strings. If we wanted these to be like integer values, we could put numbers here. If we wanted it to be an array, we could put an empty array here, which you'll see in a different example. But to me, like I said, it's just cool to see how, to me, like syntactically, it looks a lot better and it makes a lot of sense. And so we'll see how this looks over here. So now I'm console logging, so you guys can see hello is right here, and this is our email, and then your password is right here. So you can see that literally just from setting these values in here, hello and your password, that's it. That's all we have to do for those values to automatically be there. So when we console log it right now, it defaults to hello and your password without us even having to type anything in over here in the fields. So just to show that, that's how we would set the initial state. So then when we actually start typing things in, so we fill out the email, fill out the password, and you guys can see over here those console logs are running, and then down here, you can finally see the final output of the email and the password down here. So just an example of like how, again, we didn't use set state, we used set email and set password, and those are functions that we, created or gave our own unique names to pair with the names of our like state variables that we're using with our hooks. So when you're using state with hooks, you're going to use functional React components. They take 2 arguments. It's going to be the state variable itself and then the name of the setter function that's going to update that variable. And again, we're going to use the setter function always instead of set state. So you're never going to use set state to update a hook. So fundamentally different things, but important to understand that. Okay, we're talking about another specific type of hook called useEffect. And you can think of useEffects very similar to component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount combined all into one. And so again, this is for anybody who's like already a little bit familiar with React, but if not, like we'll see what this looks like in an example. So here's another example of, in this case, we are using a hook and where you can see using an array. So the classroom list is going to be an empty array when this component is created. And we're going to use the set classroom list function to actually add values into classroom list. So as you guys can see, make a fetch call and I get some data. And I use set classroom list to actually update the value of it and to store my responses into classroom list. So now down here, you can see I'm using useEffect and it's calling an anonymous function, and it runs this get classes from database method, and this is what is basically doing all the work in this component in terms of like when it renders, this is going to trigger the useEffect to run just like a component did mount. And then it's going to run my get classes from DB. Now this callback array down here, this like weird syntax, this is a whole separate topic in itself. Highly recommend you guys read up on that if you're looking into using useEffects or hooks in general, because this is like really important. So a few issues that I've run into is that, one, depending on how you use useEffects or you write your code, you can definitely end up getting some like infinite loops or like unintentional re-renders that you might not want, or like page refreshes that you might not want. So just really be careful of that, because it is different than component did mount, even though it works very similarly to it. So just know that it's not like a complete one for one, and you might get some unexpected results when you use it. But however, general for high level purpose understanding, it is similar to doing the same thing. So you'll see on the next slide, when I console log this classroom list, I know you guys don't see it in this code because this screenshot was after I took the before I had taken out the console log. But so you guys can see here that the console log will give me the responses from my database, and then I'm able to show them then at this point. So this is my class list, and then I'm able to render those onto the UI once we grab them. But again, just another example of this is all being handled really by useEffect being called when this component renders, which then calls the get classes from DB function. So again, just wanted to give you guys, just show you like a little bit of an example of how it's being used. So in this case, I decided to, all this code, like this fetch call, could have gone inside the useEffect. I don't know that it would have been the best approach. Like I said, I haven't been working with it long enough to really know like standards or best practice yet. But I know this definitely could have gone inside the useEffect if you wanted to. I don't know if it would give you the same results exactly like as intended. But I chose to split it out because I need to use async and await. So I split it out of the useEffect for that reason, and then just decided to call it inside. But again, you can do pretty much any of this inside of useEffect as well too. So you got options. So useEffects work similar to component did mount, and just be aware of unintentional renders and or infinite loops when you're using it. So in summary, hooks do not replace state. They really work in conjunction with them. So it's just another way of giving developers options for handling state, making their code readable for other developers, and it gives you some other advantages when you start getting into things like useEffect. And there's another type of hook called use context. So like when you get into the other advantages that I'm not like completely sure of myself yet, but like if you get into the advantages of using hooks, there's reasons that you might want to use hooks in certain scenarios where you might want to use hooks versus state for some reasons, but you're not married to either one of them. So you can mix and match between state or hooks and you're completely fine. So just keep that in mind. It's not like a new thing that one is deprecated, now you have to use hooks. No, you can still mix and match in your code between hooks and state. So when you're working with state without hooks, you're going to use React class components, and you're also going to update the state using set state. All right, and then when you're using hooks, you're going to be using functional components, and instead of using set state, you're going to be using the setter functions that you create or that you name to update your state variables. Lastly, useEffect works similarly to component did mount, but just remember to beware of unintentional rendering and possibly getting some infinite loops and your computer crashing or your app crashing, because that happened to me. So yeah, so that's like a very high level overview intro with a couple examples to hooks and useEffect. So any feedback from you, Lau?
No, it's pretty good actually.
All right, cool. Thank you. Did you what?
Sorry.
Hello? Oh, you good. No, you're good. So do I already have is it in the operating systems slides?
No, it's a new one. React hooks. So it's in the same folder.
Okay. Let me see. It's already in the share drive?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Give me just 1 second, guys. I'm just looking for the slides really quick. I got it. My computer is moving a little slow, so I got everything running. Oh wait, no, maybe I don't have it. Sorry guys, I got a slow loading computer over here. I got Skype going. I got the eCam live for the live stream going. Yeah, so it's just killing my computer a little bit. Yeah, I don't have them.
I can't. I resent it to you anyway, but because you're already on it. You're in the share settings, so. But I resent it to you anyway.
Hold on, is it inside the?
They're in Yahoo.
Yeah. But.
So I have a notes folder in mine, and I just put it in my notes folder. I don't know if you have a notes folder in yours.
No, what do you mean a notes folder? The 2020 folder?
No. You have your Slack up? I could try to send you a shareable link.
Yeah. If you have it. Yeah, that could work.
What was our channel? Shoot. Wait a minute. Oh, here you go. I got it.
Okay.
I'm sent it to you in the Slack.
Okay. You said it on Skype?
Slack. Oh, I'm on my phone, so wait, I can send it to myself and send it to you that way. Hold up. I'll send it to myself. Yeah. Alright, where's the Skype card go? Where'd you go? Okay, there you go. Alright, so how do I send something to you? Not share screen, not add people, not start recording. I do a message. Please. So, alright, I sent to the messages.
Got it. Alright. After a little delay, there we go, y'all. Got everything back. Appreciate y'all for sticking with us. Cool. Oh my goodness. Come on, Google Drive. Man, really? Alright. Finally. Alright. Should be good.
Ready? Are you on the first slide or?
No, 1 sec, it's loading on the God, why is every single thing moving so slow? Alright, we should be on the first slide now. Or unless there might be a lag, on the stream.
Alright. So today I guess I'm gonna talk about similar to you. I don't really struggled all week trying to use hooks. So I learned a lot about it. So I figured I'll just share the knowledge that I've gained throughout the week, my course of learning. So a little bit different than you. I'll probably do more of a deep dive into why things happen the way they do, because I had a lot of difficulties with my system crashing. So I think that's important to understand why.
For sure. Next slide.
Yep. All right. So again, just trying to keep things brief and to the point. So really, the purpose of useEffect is just really to encapsulate your side effects, and it only could be used in functional components. So when we talk about side effects, we talk about anything that's happening outside of your local function. So anything that so things like API calls, when you update local state, when you update the DOM, anything like that will sort of be a side effect or a reason for a useEffect to be used. So
next one.
We'll go to the next slide. So right before I get into useEffect, I think it's really important. Like I said, I had a couple of times the system crashed on me, nonstop loops, infinite loops. So I thought it was really important to understand why that happened. So I went back to the life cycles. Pretty much I think it's important to understand too that hooks are really different than React life cycles. So the life cycle continues to go on. However, this useEffect hook goes on after the life cycle method. So that's really why you get so many infinite loops, because it goes on. It's almost like a fifth render that occurs when this useEffect occurs before it happens the first time. So if you have something that changes your DOM and it causes for another update, that's going to cause an infinite loop, because we'll talk about that a little bit later before I get into it.
Next one.
Yep. So before we get into it, we'll talk a little bit about just the React lifecycle, so that everybody understands what they are and that we're all on the same page as we move forward. These are the more current ones. I think this is React version 16.4. So all the ones that they're no longer in use are not here. So you have your first stage of the life cycle is your mounting phase. So that when you're born, when your component is born, in that phase you have what you call a constructor. So that's the first thing that happens. That's the first render phase that happens there. Your constructor happens, and then you render those changes to the DOM. So anytime your component is first initially rendered, and you want something to be, or some type of state to be in that component when it's initially rendered, it will go in your constructor function, because that function there is going to be there when you're doing your first initial render. Once you move past that, React updates the DOM. So once you get past your constructor and your first initial render, React now updates your DOM, and that's when all your refs are used at that point as well. After that happens, you go down to your component did mount. And when your component did mount happens, that also causes a render. So you have efficiently two renders. So after all that happens and the component did mount, we'll move to our next slide. We'll move to that next slide. We'll get back to how useEffect sort of falls into that life cycle. But I think it's important to understand how the life cycles move as we talk about useEffect, because useEffect really is a way that you trigger a render in your functional component because you don't have state. So that's pretty much what you're doing when you're using useEffect. So what can you do with useEffect? You can add an effect. You could skip reinvoke an effect. You can also clean up after the effect. So you can do all three of those things, and that sort of helps you manage your effects. So that, like I said, or like Darian said previously, that this one of the side effects or one of the problems with useEffect is that it can definitely cause a lot of infinite loops. So again, cleaning up after your effect is one way to sort of mediate between that. However, but it won't stop it if you're not really sure how to use useEffect properly. So what can your useEffect do? Look to the right to that piece of code there. Pretty much when you add an effect, you add it above everything else in your component. It's in a functional component. And when that console block effect added, that effect that's how you add an effect to
hang on, I'm still on this on the graphic. Should I be on the next slide?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, my bad. So you might want to say that back one more time. My bad.
You here?
Yep.
All right. So so in this slide right here, we're looking at code. So in this code on the right hand side, it's just pretty much showing you how, in a very simple way, how to add a useEffect. It's very simple. is required. It requires you to use a function to invoke it. So this is how a use effect is sort of added. This effect right here will run every time on a render. Remember when we say a render, well, I didn't say it before, but when we talk about a render, we're talking about after a component did mount. So that's after the constructor and the render happens. That's after the DOM updates. Then that's after the component did mount. That's when your use effect now will take place and will cause a refresh of your DOM. So that's a basic initial way of adding an effect. We'll move to the next slide. This slide pretty much talks a little bit more in detail about what I just mentioned. So I won't read all of it, but I will talk about it again. Like I said before, this is like this example I'm using is like a form. If you're filling out a form, your form will be initially empty. And then, so if you had a use effect, and your use effect says something like update form. So if you type like a name or something in your form, and that's going to cause an update. I'm not going to be as specific of how it works when you do a handle change. I'm just going to just say in general that when we put some type of text in our form, it causes we want it to cause some type of an update, a render, so that we can update our form. So how React will work if you were going to do that, if you're going to set up an effect, would that it would do the initial render. Remember, this is a functional component, so it's not a class component, so it's not going to do the constructor render. It's just going to do initial render. Doing that initial render, we're going to be at that point where we do the refs and the DOM update, and at that point, anything you want, that's when React is going to look to make change to update your form. Well, actually, at that point, we follow this form right here. It's going to look at the effect that you want to render. It's going to sort of put it in memory. And then it's going to move forward. At this point, your UI will still be blank. Once you move forward after that, React will then update your DOM. Once your browser repaints your DOM, then your use effect will take place. Then once your user clicks submit, the form will be updated. That's pretty much the cycle of how it goes, and it goes through that cycle through the entire time. I think there's an error on the other side. Your form wouldn't start off empty. Your form will start off more. It will have some type of data in it, and then it will go through the same process every time you use this use effect. So move forward. The last thing we talked about with the use effect, aside from adding effect, was talking about re-invoking it, and we talked about the cleanup function, cleaning up from the DOM. So pretty much, so how a use effect works is that if you look at the code on your left-hand side, we have use state that's going to set state for this component, and we're going to try to we have a button on this the UI, and it's going to just every time you press the button, it's going to increase the number count by 1. So that's pretty much the use state of it. We start that number off at 0, so that's why the 0 in the use state. That's the initial value starts there. Use state, we didn't really talk about it much, but it's sort of a deconstructed array. So it's really 2 arrays. Well, it really is 1 array, and the initial index of the array, the first index of the array, is where you're going to store your state, and the next index in the array is where you're going to store your function to change your state. So this is just a way of deconstructing it. And we assign use state, we assign initial value to 0, but we could assign that value to anything we wanted to. We could assign it to a number, but again, just because this starts at 0, we're going to start it at 0. The next function we see is the use effect function, sort of similar to the one that we showed before, where it said add use effect. And in this one it says console log unborn. Just to reiterate that this effect right here will be run when you mount an update. So meaning the first time, or after the component update or the render happens, that's when this use effect will run. If you notice that I'm using the second function call in this use effect, and I'm doing that because a use effect will run when the first render, and then it will run every single time an update occurs to the DOM. So in order to stop that from happening, I use an empty array there to say that I only want you to run the first time when the component is mounted. So we move next. Another useful thing to add about the use effect tool is that you can use multiple of them. You can use as many as you would like in your functional component. How it will work is that they will run one after the other in logical order, the way you set them up. So in this one, I'm using a second use effect, and the purpose of this one is because I want my use effect to run on an update. Now, remember, the first one made it so that it only ran when the component was mounted. Now, I'm saying in this one, I want you to run when the component is updated. And how I'm controlling it is I have a global variable let born on line number 3, and I set that to false. So as soon as in this function, in the useEffect function, the second one, I check to see if that born is true. If it's not true, if it's true, then I say made a mistake and I learned. So I print out some type of text that I always want to be on the door. However, if it isn't true, then we're going to set born to true, because that means that this was the first time it was mounted. And that's one way to sort of control the effects of the useEffect so that you can prevent infinite looping. The other way to control some of your effects is the cleanup function. And this function is designed to clean up whatever you need to just clean up on the DOM. So here I just put useEffect console mount to show it. I put inside there growth, so unmount. So I guess what I'm saying, when growth is hit to it, this is more of a complex function. I set the function to a certain value, and I say when it hits that value, then I want you to stop. But I have a better example in the next slide, so I'm going to show it to you in the next slide, if we can move.
For sure.
All right. So this is a real use case of a cleanup function. So pretty much what you see here is that ignore the use state. I'm not really using the use state. I was doing 2 things at one time with this function. Probably should have erased it for the purposes of the slide. But in any event, inside the useEffect, what I'm doing is I added an event listener to the window. So on my mouse move, it's going to keep track and provide me the coordinates of my mouse. That's what console log E is. It's going to provide me all the E data to what I'm doing on the screen. So if you can imagine, anytime that you're moving your mouse on your screen, it's all this data that's coming out on the side of your console. So if I want to turn that off, because before in JavaScript, when you added an event listener, you had to have a way to stop the event listener. So if I wanted to turn this off, then one way to do it would be to put a return statement inside of that useEffect. And now what I did in that return statement was saying, remove the event listener on mouse move. So every time you move the mouse, we're going to take that event listener off. So we can make sure that we don't have that event listener on longer than we need to be. And a way to clean up the function is to put a return function inside of your useEffect, and whatever you want to clean up or whatever you want to make sure you get rid of, you do that in that area right there. So move forward.
But how does returning it get rid of it?
Well, that's the way the function is designed. So again, and this one is getting rid of it because remember, if you look at number 14, I'm adding something. Number 16, I'm removing it.
So when you use return inside the useEffect, it basically
runs is the last thing that runs. So after everything runs is said and done, that runs.
Okay, huh?
So that's how it cleans it up. You know what I mean? So like when you put something there, you want it to be empty. You just let everything go and everything show, and then at the final end, that's gonna run and clean that away, take that away.
So either writing this type of cleanup function inside the useEffect or using some sort of like conditional is the best ways to stop it from re-rendering. I wouldn't
say the best way. It's just another tool that you have in your box.
Yeah.
I'm a baby at just like you, so I'm pretty sure there's a lot more advanced ways to do this. But at this point, fundamentally, this is 2 fundamental ways that I could pretty much wrap my brain around to figure out how to implement it.
Okay, for sure, I got you. Next slide.
Yep. And so again, keeping it brief today, guys. But closing thoughts is that you only can call your hooks from the top level of a function. I mean, before the render. It should be one of the top things you do after you use state. If you're using use state. That is a hook anyway, but it should be one of the top things that you have in your function. Well, it has to be. It shouldn't be. It has to be. It won't work otherwise. You can't use hooks in the class component. So any component that has a constructor you cannot use that in there, or a render function. By default, the useEffect is run after the initial render and every subsequent render thereafter. Again, unless you do one of the conditionals, use a conditional or use a cleanup function or some other more advanced way that we haven't talked about today to sort of clean it up. These are the ways that, it works. That's all I have for you today.
For sure. Well, I think that was good because you did kind of like come in and go way more, because I know I just learned from you for sure. Because you went a little bit deeper on some of the stuff that I was fooling around with. Let me see. Let me bring us back real quick. Okay. Wait. Wait. Lost this. Go to scenes. And where are we at? Select all cameras. Yeah. Okay. We should be good. So yeah, I think that was really good. 40 minutes on the dot. So we saved ourselves, 20. But I think it was good. So what do you think is what do you think was the big takeaway from this week playing around with hooks and everything? Cause you spent a lot more time doing React than I have. So like, I guess what are your takeaways now that you had a chance to play around with a little bit more and having that in your toolbox?
It's definitely useful. I mean, I had to use it because I was stuck with trying to update a form, and my parent component was buried deep. So there was no way I could update the form. I don't know. There was no way really to do it. I needed some type of different strategy. And it came in handy. It worked sort of seamlessly. I still had to, make other things happen and make it work. But I definitely think it's a useful tool.
Definitely.
It's very helpful. So I don't have anything negative to say about it. I mean, it's very abstract. So there's a lot to sort of understand and wrap your head around when you're first trying to figure it out. Because a lot of things move really quickly. You don't really know why everything's moving like this. But other than that, I thought it was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, guys, like for me, it was the Redux thing brought me to hooks. I was trying to learn Redux, trying to implement it in my project, and I was having like just too difficult of a time understanding the dispatchers and the store and the whatever the other things are in Redux. So like basically, it was a big learning curve to learn Redux for what I felt like was making my code harder to maintain. So like that made hooks intriguing, and then the fact that you could swap back and forth, like Redux seems more like a commitment you have to make. Like if you use Redux, you gotta go with Redux, like versus where we can always kind of bounce back and forth between state and hooks, which I like a lot. So guys, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, make sure you guys leave us some comments down below, and we'll make sure we get back to you guys on that one. And let us know if this was helpful. We'll make sure to as we continue developing using hooks, we'll bring more updates and kind of some more in-depth knowledge. But for this week, we just wanted to share with you guys what we learned this week from kind of trial and error, and hopefully it will help you guys out. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. See you, La.
Yep.